Battling startitis is a totally normal thing for many knitters to deal with, and that's why I am not ashamed about today's episode. It's been about a month since the last time I updated you on my works in progress and my finished objects, and I have to confess, some things didn't get finished because I started new things instead. If we haven't met yet, hi, I'm Lauren. I design knitting patterns with a focus on accessories, primarily socks, but hats and scarves and shawls and things too, just not garments because those give me a headache. And in today's episode of The Apiary, my knitting podcast, I'm going to be sharing some updates with you on the projects I've been working on and the projects I've recently finished. So let's start off on a positive note with the finished objects from last episode's works in progress. And one of them is this pair of pink worsted socks. Look, it's all done. And in fact, the pattern is now live on my blog, and there is a free version there supported by ads. You can also get a paid version in a PDF format on Ravelry or Etsy. That's totally fine too. Let's talk a little bit about what I love about these socks. These are the follow-up socks to another pair of socks that I previously did, which is these guys, this simple set of basic worsted weight socks. These are meant to be learning socks for newer sock knitters. So I figured once knitters get the hang of things with a simple worsted sock, maybe they want to try some texture in their socks, but maybe they don't quite feel comfortable yet moving on to fingering weight socks and, the teeny tiny yarn and the teeny tiny needles. And there's a lot more texture there and there's a lot more stitches that can go in there. So I decided, let's do a little bit of an in-between step and have a worsted weight sock with a little bit more texture in it. So these are also knit with worsted weight yarn. Both of these are knit with Knit Picks Wool of the Andes. It's a great worsted weight pure wool yarn. And they're both knit on US size 4 needles. I'm sorry, my metric system friends, I always forget what millimeter circumference that is in needle size, but there are lots of conversion charts online. You can look that up. So these are called the Syllabus Slipper Socks. They were part of a blog hop that I did earlier this month where everybody would post a pattern for a pair of slipper socks or slippers on their blog each day, and then we would kind of send each other traffic. And so it was kind of fun to have that theme, and it was fun to have that incentive to experiment with designing something a little different from what I would normally do, because I've only done one other pair of worsted weight socks, and these were, vanilla worsted weight socks that were really meant to be more utilitarian than anything else. But if you've seen some of my other designs, you know that I love tiny, tiny details. I love little bobbles and lace and cable. And so it was fun to think about how I could translate that aesthetic into a thicker yarn. I did knit these socks using Magic Loop. I have found that although the teeny tiny circulars work really well for me when I'm knitting regular socks, when I am knitting at a tight gauge like this, where I am knitting, worsted weight sock down on a US 4, which is really too small for most worsted weight yarn, but I wanted to have the durability for socks, the tiny circulars did start to hurt my hand at that gauge because I was really having to work pretty hard to get the needles into the stitches. So I switched over to Magic Loop for this sock design, and I knit them both Magic Loop. I did knit them one at a time Magic Loop. We'll talk more about 2 at a time Magic Loop in a few minutes because I have an update on that one as well. But for 1 at a time, Magic Loop is fine for me. I don't mind. And there are circumstances like these socks where I think it makes a lot of sense. So again, as with so many other things in knitting, choose the path that is comfortable for you, that gets you the result you want without causing yourself physical harm. And so for me in that case, it was Magic Loop for these guys. I knit them using a set of my standard Chowgu size 4 needles, 32-inch needles, tip to tip, which is normally what I use for knitting my shawls. I'll have an update on some shawls for you soon too. But they work great for socks too. So that's what I did for this pair of socks. And again, these are the Knit Picks Wool of the Andes worsted. Great yarn, really good budget yarn. Feels a little rough on the hands when you're first working with it. And I don't know that I would want to wear it next to skin for a garment. It's a little rough for that. But once it's washed and blocked, it does soften up really nicely and it feels fine on my feet. It doesn't feel rough and scratchy on my feet. For a sweater, I would probably wear a shirt underneath. My next finished object is something I'm so excited about that I did not even block it before I decided I was going to share it with you in this episode. That's how excited I am. I am a devotee of blocking. I rarely share things that are unblocked if they're finished. Like I will block it as part of the finishing process. And I will be blocking it later today. I'm not going to leave this unblocked, but I'm so excited about this one that I had to share it with you now anyway. And it's the finished third sample of my berry scone shawl. You may have seen some of my updates about this. I accidentally felted the original sample because I came home from a trip and threw everything in the wash and was trying to be responsible and forgot that the shawl was in there. And then the second one I lost on another trip. I left it on the plane after an overnight international flight where I didn't sleep much and then never got it back despite filing some reports with the airline. So I decided to knit another sample. I decided to make this particularly challenging for myself and add an extra lace repeat. So the pattern calls for 3 pleats of the lace section, 1, 2, and 3. I decided to add a 4th and then that nice thick seed stitch border. So I made this as big as I possibly could. I used up every single little bit of yarn that I had on me, and I'm really pleased with how this turned out. So this yarn is the Bad Sheep Yarn Fingering in the colorway Celeste. I love working with Bad Sheep Yarn. They have been one of my favorite collaborators for years. And so this is the last sample of the Berry Scone Shawl was also knit with their yarn in the Feathers colorway. But I had 2 skeins of Celeste sitting in my yarn dresser, that guy back behind me. And I figured I can make a new sample of my lost shawl using this one. So you can see there's the occasional little bit of dark blue just to add some interest to it. But overall, it's this very soft, very subtly tonal light blue yarn. You can see a little bit of variation in there across the seed stitch. It is a great squishy yarn. I love seed stitch anyway because I think seed stitch really amplifies the squish factor of a yarn. We're going to come back to that in today's episode too. But this is just, I'm really pleased with how this turned out. Obviously, I do still need to block it. You can see here, this looks really scrunched and unappealing. This is not exciting, this scrunched up yarn. So I am going to block it. I will post a video about kind of my philosophy on blocking and how I block things. Spoiler alert, it very rarely involves stretching things or pinning things or using wires, but occasionally I do use blocking wires. And this is one of the projects where I will absolutely be using a blocking wire. Also, a fun little detail here, if you see these teeny tiny little baubles, these are actually crocheted baubles and not knit baubles. My experience with knit baubles is that I don't like the gap in the fabric behind them. The crochet baubles leave no little gap there. It's just a little piece of fabric that kind of pops out of it. And they're also really cute and tidy, which I like. I find that sometimes knit baubles are just a little bigger than what I want. So I kind of want something. Frequently when I'm designing, I want something that is similar in size to a noop and not a bobble, but I want more of a 3D element to it than a noop. I find that noops tend to lay a little flatter against the work than I want my little bit of texture to do. So these little crochet baubles are perfect. And I do include a step-by-step explanation in the patterns for how to do those crochet baubles, so don't panic. And yes, like I said, this was my 3rd sample of this, and I will be honest, I was pretty bored of it by the time I was done with it. I am not the kind of knitter who likes to knit the same thing more than once. Sometimes I'll knit something twice if I really love it, but more than twice is very, very rare. And that usually means that something has gone wrong, or I'm in a phase where I'm like obsessed with one particular thing. So like, you know, sometimes you'll get hooked on a certain breakfast, you'll eat the same breakfast for 3 weeks in a row. No, just me. Sometimes that happens with knit things too. And I'll be like, I'm going to knit all of the DK weight single rib hats. And then eventually I'll get tired of that and decide to do something else. So occasionally that'll happen. But most of the time I am knitting a thing once, maybe twice if I really love it. And then I'm moving on. But now I'm curious about everybody else out there and whether, like, are you the kind of knitter who also just does something once or twice and then moves on? Or do you find a pattern that you love and it becomes your go-to pattern for something and you knit it over and over again? Tell me down in the comments. The next finished object is something I'm also really excited about. And this is from my Fix It, Finish It, or Frog It episode that I did a while ago. And it's this little scarf for my kiddo. I only had, maybe 6 more inches to go on it when I shared it with you all. And it had just been languishing in my closet for months, if not a year. It had been really just kind of sitting there. And so I knew that if I shared it in that episode, I would have the incentive that I needed to get that thing finished because I would want to share the finished project with you. So as you can see, maybe you can't see, it has been lovingly worn already many times by my kidlet. It doesn't get terribly cold where we are, but when it starts raining, it's kind of fun to have a cozy scarf on, and we've had a little bit of rain this winter, so that's been nice. It's a great little snug shawl. This is knit with one of the Amano Yarns Inti yarns. I held it double here. It's this wonderfully colorful variegated yarn. They did recently add more solid colors and softer pastels too, so I'm really excited to use some of that for myself. This is a color palette that's a little vibrant for me and what I prefer to wear, and so I'm looking forward to trying some of their kind of mellower colors in some of my other projects. And the final finished object that I have to show you is something that I couldn't even hint at the last time I did one of these episodes because it was still completely and totally under wraps. And it's this, the first pattern in this year's Golden Honey Sock Club. So if you are not aware of the Golden Honey Sock Club, it is my quarterly mystery sock club. This is my 4th year running it, and new patterns come out in February, May, August, and November, with a 5th pattern in December that is always exclusive to the sock club. The only way to get it is to join that year's sock club. Now, the nice thing is it's never too late to join the sock club. You can always just join anytime you want to. So you can still always get that fifth pattern. You don't have to, you don't have a limited time to join to get the fifth pattern. So this is the first one for this year. This is called the Florilegium socks. Florilegium is a word that comes from a Latin word that refers to picking or culling flowers, and sometimes also thinking about arranging them in a bouquet. But what it really refers to is a collection of writings. So often, short stories or essays or, an assortment of brief writings all assembled together into a single volume. The Golden Honey Sock Club is always book themed, but for the first 3 years, it was really closely tied to my love of romance novels. Those were the books that got me through the absolute worst of the COVID years when I was reading, 1, 2, sometimes even 3 books a week, just barreling through books to try and find, some joy and some security and a sense of comfort and stability. And so I feel really emotionally connected to romance novels. And so I named a lot of the patterns in the early Golden Honey Sock Clubs after things having to do with romance novels. The first year was common tropes in romance novels. The second year was archetypes that you see frequently in historical romance novels. And then the third year referred to common things that you would see on the covers of romance novels. This year, I finally kind of ran out of ideas that had to do with romance novels, and so I expanded to bookish things generally. The Florilegium socks are the first socks in that kind of more bookish theme series, but there will be more patterns coming with some fun new vocabulary words that I think you'll enjoy. So let's take a slightly closer look at the Florilegium socks. You can see they have these lovely little eyelets here and then some double cables and eyelets and double cables. And it's a really simple, soothing stitch pattern. You will memorize it very quickly. That is kind of my sweet spot as a designer. I always want to design a stitch pattern that is complicated enough that it stays interesting. You're not going to get bored knitting it, but it's simple enough that you can memorize it after, 1 or 2 repeats of it. So the Florilegium socks, I finished these guys. I'm so happy with them. I love them. Let's talk a little bit about the yarn. The yarn is a custom in-house yarn for my local yarn shop, the Knitting Lounge in Simi Valley. And this is their custom sock yarn. It's a wonderfully squishy, slightly thicker than usual sock yarn. And that's one of the things that I love about it. So most sock yarns tend to hover at about 400 to 420 yards per 100 grams. This one has 387 yards per 100 grams. So it is a little bit thicker and a little bit squishier, but not so much that it's going to make a huge gauge difference. If you're usually working in 400 to 420 yards, you'll probably just find that your stitches feel a little squishier. As for fiber content, it's a pretty standard blend of 80% merino, 20% nylon. So if you're one of those sock knitters who really prefers to have a little bit of nylon in your sock yarn, this can be a good choice for you. And this was a really fun collaboration. I love the folks over at the Knitting Lounge. They're super sweet. When I ran into them at the SoCal Fiber Fair last November, Corinne, the owner, suggested that we work together on a project, and we kind of went over to their booth and just looked at yarns together until we figured out which colorway made the most sense for all of us. And Corinne really loves vibrant pinks. I love a good pink. She really wanted me to kind of lean into some of the intricate textures that I love doing anyway. And so this felt like just a perfect encapsulation of who we both were as yarn lovers and knitters. All right, now let's talk about the works in progress. And we might as well eat the frog first thing in the morning and talk about the one that I am least proud of, which is these mittens that I showed you last time. I did a recently finished object and works in progress episode. And as you can see, I have made 0 progress on them. Yeah, nothing. In my defense, I have had some other larger projects kind of come up that I needed to devote some attention to, but also not entirely that. There was another factor too, which is that I had originally started these when we were planning on taking a trip to somewhere chilly in February over President's Day weekend. That trip wound up not happening. We decided not to do it. And so I kind of put these on hold because I had other more pressing things. And where I live, I don't really need mittens ever. But now the trip is back on for the first week of April, and it's Boston in April. You could get snowed on or you could have perfect sunshine. Like, I just don't know. So I'm back to work on the mittens. I will have these finished the next time I do one of these episodes for you. I promise. Hold me to it. They are still really cute though. I like the little stripies. They're very soft. I'm sorry. I'll get to work, I promise. Next project I'm working on is something that started out as a learning tool and a demonstration for a workshop I was teaching, and now I kind of just need to finish it. And it's this sock right here. I am knitting it on 2 circular needles, so you can see I've got one here in front and one here in back. It's actually a really fun and really intuitive method of knitting socks, and I kind of wish I had tried it before obsessing over Magic Loop last summer, because it is pretty straightforward. It actually makes a lot of sense. It operates on kind of the same principle as Magic Loop, but you don't have all of the extra long cord kind of moving everywhere and tripping you up. I'm knitting this sock, and I'll knit a pair to go with it. I'm not going to knit just one sock, but I'm knitting this sock with some leftovers from a sample that I knit for Bad Sheep Yarn last year when we did my illustrated couple socks together. So this is yarn leftover from the sample that I knit for them for their shop and then sent off to them to keep. And that's what this beautiful multicolored yarn is. I can't remember what this purple yarn is. I think I bought it at a local yarn shop when I was on vacation a few years ago, and I have since lost the label, and I feel bad about that because I'm usually really diligent about keeping track of labels and yarns and things, but this one for some reason slipped by me. It's a simple vanilla sock. I use my standard vanilla sock recipe for this one. I'll link that down in the description below. That's free over on my blog. And it's a great way for you to learn how to create your own perfect vanilla sock recipe because no 2 feet are the same, right? And so even though you'll have a pattern that'll fit really well, and it might even be close to perfect, sometimes you can improve upon perfection. So a sock recipe that kind of walks you through the steps of how to design the perfect sock for your unique feet can be really helpful. So I'll link that down below. But for me, it's a 60 stitch cast on. I knit the legs to about 6 inches. I do a heel flap and gusset with kind of the standard ratios for the heel flap and gusset. And then I do a wedge toe with a decrease every other round. And then there are some people who do a wedge toe where they increase the frequency of decreases as they get closer to the toe. I don't like mine to fit that way, but different people have different preferences. So that's one of the cool things about knitting, right? You can adjust things the way you want them. So as you can see, I've finished the heel flap. I'm done with the gusset. So now I'm just kind of working my way down along the foot, and then I'll get to the toe and it'll be done. So hopefully I will have at least one finished sock for you for this one by the time I see you next. My next whip is also something that I could not show you before because it was embargoed until news about the yarn finally was released. And now the yarn is available, and so I can share it with you. This is the Amy Sure Makes Comfort Silk Linen. I am knitting a triangle shaped shawl with it, an asymmetrical triangle. I am in love with this very simple lace repeat texture on it. I don't even have words for how much I like this yarn, and my judgment is not tainted by the fact that I love Amy very much. If you have been hanging out here for a while, you know that Amy and I occasionally do conversation videos on each other's channels. Amy is a dear friend of mine, but their yarn is an independently good yarn that I would like even if we weren't dear friends. It is 50% merino, a really nice fine merino. It's got 25% silk and 25% linen. So it's got drape, it's got sheen, it's got a little bit of memory. And for me, I find that it does help mitigate some of the issues that I struggle with when I'm working with a pure linen yarn or a pure silk yarn, which is primarily that those yarns have so little stretch and memory. And I'm a tight knitter. And so when I use those yarns, I do sometimes get some bizarre hand pain, including little ridges in my fingertip because I like to knit with just an absolute stranglehold on my needles. So the merino content in here adds that bit of stretch and loftiness to it that helps prevent some of those issues for me. The silk and linen give it some drape, some breathability. It's really lovely. It's super squishy. This pattern is going to be going out for testing very soon. So if you would like to join the list of people and apply to test this, I will drop a link down below. If you see this video in like 6 months from now and this pattern has already been released, totally fine. You can still join the tester pool because I send out calls for testers pretty regularly. And that is the only place that I send those out. I post them on Yarn Pond and then I send the link out to my tester pool. So if you like test knitting and you want to try test knitting some of my patterns, feel free to sign up for that anytime you see this video. All right, as you can see, I've made pretty good progress on this. It's pretty big. We're getting there. It's not quite done yet. I want to use up all 2 skeins of yarn and I still have this much left. So I've got a few more days of work on this probably before this is ready. And then again, I will need to block it too because I block everything, but especially any stitch pattern with a little bit of lace in it. You can see with this one, I blocked this part here at the very bottom when I was just getting kind of spitballing ideas and I wanted to see how the texture would look when it was done. And it is much smoother and flatter and drapier and flippity floppier than the parts up here, which look lumpier, right? So blocking it opens it out, lets the fiber settle into place, smooths everything, gives it a little more drape. I'm a really big fan of blocking everything. And finally, here's the other reason that I did not make any progress on those mittens and probably didn't make any progress on some other pending whips that I have forgotten about. And it's this scarf right here, which I'm really excited about and obsessed with and I can't put down. It's just a simple seed stitch scarf, but it's very special for two reasons. First, you'll notice that there's a really soft, subtle, marled color change happening here. And that's because I am knitting this with one strand of lots of teeny tiny leftovers from the mitered square blanket of doom. That's right. The project that was meant to use up all my leftovers also left me with a whole bunch of teeny tiny leftovers. The little balls were like this big. They were all maybe 5 to 7 grams of yarn, some of them even smaller, some of them, 3 and 4 grams of yarn. And that's not really enough to do much with most of the time. And so I was kind of kicking around different ideas. I posted a reel on Instagram and Facebook, and I got all sorts of interesting suggestions, some of them helpful, some of them kind of bizarre. And I decided that what I wanted to do was turn this into something usable. All of these are wool yarns that don't wash well. And so, a lot of the suggestions for lap blankets for nursing homes and hats for, kids who are going through chemo. Great suggestions, but those things need to be washable, and none of this yarn is particularly washable. So instead, I decided to turn it into a scarf, and I had a gift card for my birthday to Webs from some very dear family members. And so I bought myself 4 skeins of this yarn right here. And this yarn is 50 grams, 154 yards of 95% cashmere and 5% extra fine merino wool. It's a worsted weight yarn, so it is really plump. And that means that when I hold it double with this, I get a really nice thick yarn. And the creamy white helps kind of balance out all of the different colors here. Holding this double with a worsted weight yarn also means that I can knit it up more quickly and that the color changes will be less jarring. So if you look here, you can see for sure where one yarn ends and the next one begins, but it doesn't feel as abrupt as it could feel. Sometimes when you do a color change from one yarn to another, it can feel really stark. It can feel like a really sharp contrast. And so holding the 2 yarns together helps kind of soften that effect. Pairing the really fine bits of fingering weight wool with the worsted weight cashmere wool blend also means that this is an extra squishy scarf that feels really nice against my skin. And you'll notice I'm just doing a simple seed stitch because I want to let the colors shine. The colors are what's going to matter here. And seed stitch is so squishy. I love seed stitch so much. As I was working on this, I realized that this is basically like the soft pastel hyper femme version of that Doctor Who scarf that people love knitting. So this is my Doctor Who scarf, and I'm really excited to finish it. So I have 4 balls of this. This is 1 ball worth. I just used up the first ball. So I think that's going to be enough to make a really nice, long, super squishy scarf, and I'm really excited to finish that. Hopefully in time for my trip in April as well. Now, was I supposed to cast on for this scarf? No. Did I have other things that I needed to be working on? Absolutely. Do I feel bad for it? Not really, because knitting is about joy as much as it is about anything else, right? And so, yes, I have design schedules that I need to maintain. Yes, I have deadlines that I need to meet. Yes, I have partners that I need to make sure that I am fulfilling my obligations to. And so those things always take top priority, right? I'm always going to make sure that I get my design schedule done first, make sure that my sock club patterns are ready to release on time, make sure that my collaborations with yarn stores and yarn companies are ready to go when they need to be done. But aside from that, if the choice is between 3 projects that are all for myself and they're not on a deadline and there's no time pressure, I'm going to pick the one that makes me happy. And if none of them are making me happy and excited, I'm going to cast on something else. Anyway, if you also struggle with startitis, I would love to hear about your experiences with it and how you manage it and how you keep track of all of your 30,000 whips, because I definitely have more whips around here somewhere that I have lost track of and probably do need to finish, but I like starting new projects. It's fun and it feels good. So if you've got tips and tricks for maybe not having too many whips at once, I'm all ears. All right, that about does it for this episode. I promise next month I will have some finished mittens to show you. I promise. Hold me to it. Send me comments on my other videos being like, are you working on your mittens? I promise I will work on the mittens. I will have the finished mittens for you. Otherwise, thanks for being here, and I look forward to chatting about more knitting tips and tricks with you soon.